this video, I just wanted to recap the books that I have already read from my TBR. So I briefly went over my TBR in my introduction video. I have now 42 books on my TBR. I believe in that video I only have 40 and then 2 were on the way, but I have 42 in total right now on my TBR, and I have read 7 of those. And I just wanted to kind of give my review of the 7 books that I have already read. I'm currently still reading 2 books. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first book that I finished, I'll say I finished it in 2024, would be The Night Shift by Robin Cook. I actually started reading this in December, like towards the end of December, but I didn't finish it until January. So I'm counting this as part of my 2024 TBR list. Okay, so if you see me look down, it's because I have like a reading journal and I wrote my notes in my reading journal. So I'm going to try not to look down as much as possible, but I might not be able to help it. So with Night Shift, I've been a Robin Cook fan since the 7th grade. We used to have the Scholastic Book Fair where you could either go in the library and buy the books, or you could order the books and then you'd walk into class and they'd be sitting on your desk. So I had never heard of Robin Cook. I just used to, I think by that point I was just reading random books, and I just picked a random book of his called Invasion, and I've been hooked ever since. So with Night Shift, it's not a continuation of anything, but the characters that he started using years ago, Jack and Laurie Stapleton, they're the main characters in this book as well, and they have been in a lot of his more recent books. But you don't necessarily have to know their story to read this book and and understand this book. The one thing that I love about Robin Cook books is that there's a lot of medical information in it, and then he like wraps the story around his medical knowledge, and I love that because I come from, my mom was a nurse, my dad was in the medical field. They were both in the Air Force. I've been in the medical field for a very long time, so it's like it's nerdy, like reading the stuff and then knowing what it means and all of that. But in this book right here, it starts off with Dr. Passero dying mysteriously in the parking garage of the hospital that she works at. Now, Dr. Passero happens to be a friend and colleague of Jack and Laurie Stapleton, who are medical examiners. Well, Laurie is no longer an active medical examiner. She now runs the office of the medical examiners. So one day, it's like, I guess Jack and Laurie are kind of in like a stressful home life situation. So Jack comes and he's looking for like this case that will get his mind off of the issues that are going on at home. So Jack does the autopsy of Dr. Passero, and he can't find any real reason as to why she should have died. Even though she had diabetes, like she was still in good health otherwise, and she was on top of her insulin and everything regularly, so there wasn't any real reason that he could find that she would have died. Now, Jack is not one to leave a death certificate as unknown, so he takes it upon himself to investigate his friend and colleague's death. Now, he was looking for a challenging case, and he found one in Dr. Passero. So after he starts investigating, one of the doctors that he interviews mysteriously dies. And with that death right there, he ends up smack dab in the crosshairs of a medical serial killer. what I love about this, and even though like I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm gonna tell you, like, it's only because if you've read enough of Robin Cook's books, you can, it's like I don't know how to put it, but it's like you didn't necessarily know the specifics, but you knew what was going to happen. So you may not have known who the killer was, where to look for the killer, whatever, but you knew somehow that Jack was going to get caught in the middle of whatever the killer was trying to do. Like, he was putting himself in the middle. So you can kind of like piece it together, but I will always be a fan of him. It is still very, very, very well written. It develops the story very well, especially from the beginning. So by the time you get into the action of it, you have a clear understanding of the routes that it could take. So I would give this a 4.5 out of 5, only because I've been reading his books long enough to kind of know what was coming. So it wasn't really a surprise, the ending. It was a surprise who it was and how and that, but it wasn't a surprise with actually how it ended. Hi, Bubba. Kisses. Thank you. The second book that I read so far in 2024 is Cobalt Red. And I have to say, with all that has been going on in the world since last year, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't aware of the global issues. It wasn't that I was turning a blind eye to them. I genuinely just did not know that these type of things were happening. So once I started seeing so much on Instagram, and it just piqued my curiosity. It's like, what is really happening that I'm just not aware of? Like, I can't speak on it because I have no knowledge. Like, I'm not a person to just like blindly comment on something, and social media is really not the place to ask questions, because people will attack you simply for just genuinely wanting to know something. So I literally Googled, books about Congo, books about Sudan, and this is one of the books that popped up, Cobalt Red. And I was ignorant. I simply never thought about the supply chain for batteries, cell phones, laptops, electric vehicles. Just never thought of it. Just never did it cross my mind. In this book, they talk, the author, he's interviewing like all parts of, I feel like he interviewed all parts of the supply chain except for as high as he could go. I would say that. He interviewed parents who lost children when the mines collapsed, people who are severely injured, lost legs, lost limbs, everything. They have chronic illnesses from inhaling the fumes from the mines. He interviewed women who were sexually assaulted, had AIDS, pregnancies, women who were in the mines pregnant, and then the ones that had little babies strapped to their backs. He interviewed elderly people who had been there for generations that were now displaced from their homes and had no way of making a living. It was just very, very eye-opening. And he also interviewed people in charge of the mines, and he interviewed some government officials, and it's just, all I could say was I didn't know. And I feel like there are probably more people who are unaware, and I feel like this would be a good place to start if you want to know about what's going on in the Congo. So the second book that I read this year, yes, Bubba, was Cobalt Red. What's up? You want? What do you want? Uh-huh. You want juice? Okay, I'm coming. The third book that I read for 2024 so far is The 100 Years War on Palestine. I don't even know where to begin with this book because, once again, this was just a topic that I was not educated on. I simply was not educated on. And I have no problem saying that because, you know, I've always been a person that if I was curious on something, I was going to go research it. I'm not really going to listen to what all the noise is. I was always taught to find things out on my own. That way I can have an informed opinion on things. And if you are at all curious about world events, what is happening now, what has been happening since October, then you need to pick up this book and be able to come away with it with your own opinion and not what is being force-fed. That is all that I'm going to say on this book. It is a extremely well-written book, and there's no, it really couldn't be anything but, because you're getting first-hand account of people who lived it. Just like in this book, you're getting first-hand accounts of people who went through it, who watched it happen. So there's really no review rating or whatever that you can give to this, because these are people's lives. These are real people's lives, I should say. But if you want to know why things are happening the way they are happening right now, then you need to pick up this book. The next book, the fourth book that I've read so far, is A Soul to Keep by Opal Rain. It is part of the Dustwalker Bride series. It is the first book in the Dustwalker Bride series. And I searched just for books to be able to kind of get my mind out of that heaviness of the other two books that I just showed you. I just needed a break. Like, I was, it's almost like you're learning all of these things, so now you need a break. You need a break. You need to step back and then come back to the heaviness. So I picked up this book, and I can't even tell you, I can't even remember my exact Google search that brought this book up, but up she popped. And let me just say, this book for me is a 5 out of 5. And I say that because I hated putting this book down. Like, because, you know, I don't have much to do throughout the day. I found myself just spacing the book out. Like, I didn't want it to end. The day I got the first day I got the book, I read 70 pages, and I immediately fell in love with the main characters. And I found myself, you know, praying for them to fall in love and praying for them to heal each other. The character development in this book is great. I mean, there's so much detail in the way that they were raised, you know, how they were raised and how they were treated, grown, you know, and you fall for them that way. I found myself going through the emotional roller coasters with these characters. It was, you're so invested so early on because of the storytelling. It's like you're mad when the main characters are mad, and you feel hurt when they hurt. You get upset when they get attacked, and you want the best for them. Like, I found myself rooting for the deaths of other people, like the ones that came for them. Like, I found myself just like praying that they died. It's very easy to relate to these characters, and you especially the female main character, because you get that tornness that she's feeling, being torn between two worlds, and what she wants and what society says is okay. And even towards the end, like, I got teary-eyed at the end, like with the events that happened at the end. I got teary-eyed, and you know, books don't do that to me, like, but this book had me teary-eyed towards the end. The spiciness, I would say, was next level. I am not used to reading books like this. As you can see from the first three choices, I like medical thrillers and I like history and historical fiction. Those are pretty much my genres. So this really was a step out there for me. So spiciness is right up there. I mean, I was not prepared. Like I said, I read sci-fi, medical thrillers, history, and historical fiction. So yeah, this was definitely the departure I needed from the heaviness that I was reading. I got lost in the story and I did not want it to end. When I tell you, I drug the last few pages out over days because I was waiting for the second book to arrive. So I was like kind of dragging the end of the book out. But it was a great book. Great book. The next book that I read is part of the Shadow series from Orson Scott Card. He's the author of Ender's Game and that entire series. I actually started reading Ender's Game to help my son. He had, you know, for summer reading, that was the book that he chose for summer reading, and he had to do an entire project on it. And I was like, hey, you know, I'll read it with you. That way we can talk about it, and you can talk your way through your project with me, and I can help you with understanding, you know, certain parts of it if you don't. So that's how I got hooked on Ender's Game. And I read I believe there's 5 books in that one. And then I was like, at first I was just like, oh, there's no way I'm gonna read, you know, the Shadow series, because Ender is not the main character. So I was like, oh, there's no way I'm gonna like this series enough to where I'm gonna want to carry it over into the next one. Right. So as I'm getting towards the end of Ender's series, I get to like the last book in his series and I'm like, oh, I gotta read the Shadow series. So I read the first one last year, and this is the second book in the Shadow series called Shadow of the Hegemon. And if you've read Ender's Game, you know Shadow series takes the character Bean, and Bean was considered like the second best right after Ender. So, and he was like the tiny one, the scrappy one, the very intelligent one. And so this series is about Bean. And in the first book you learn, you know, it's Bean's point of view of being in battle school, and then this book takes over, like the war is ended and everyone is now back home with their families, and then we go from what happens once everybody is back on Earth with their real families and what happens next. And I love this book. It is, I think it is a 5, like a 5-star, because I feel like the whole series like is a 5, because I feel like there isn't a lull in any of the books. Like there just isn't. Like even if they take on it, even though some of them take on different angles of the story, you still find yourself very invested in the characters, very much wanting to see certain people succeed, certain people fail. You're mentally like trying to think like these characters, trying to think of this, what they're gonna do next, like where, especially with military strategy, you're like, okay, if I was in this situation, what would I do as being? Like, how would I use these people to get what I want? Like, you're so invested that you start thinking like that. So, like I said, I read this book of 5, and I already have the 3rd one, which is called Shadow Puppets. I plan to continue to read the entire series. And then the last book, I'm unsure because I've read reviews on the last book, and it kind of ties in Ender's side with Bean's side. So, but people don't think that it was done very well. So I still don't know if I'm gonna read the last one, but I'm gonna keep going until we get there. So yeah. The next book I read was Out of Exile: Narratives from the Abducted and Displaced People of the Sudan. And if you can tell, like, I read heavy books and then I'll switch over to something light. So I read 2 heavy books, then I switched over to 2 lighter books, and now I'm back to a heavy book. Now, what I will say, after reading Cobalt Red, I felt like this book was going to have more of an explanation of what was happening, but it's strictly a book of stories, interviews, I would say, because interviews of people who have been displaced from the Sudan, and he's interviewing them in the places where they currently are. So Egypt, some of them have made it to the United States, so he's interviewing them and getting the story of how they made it to where they currently are. And he's asking them, you know, if they ever see themselves going back to the Sudan. And if some of them said no, then he's asking like why. He's getting their take on how the UN treated them. He's getting, you know, firsthand accounts of the raids that their villages experienced, and the assaults that happened, and the wrongful imprisonments, all of that. So this is another one of those books where if you don't know what's going on, and it was written a while ago. It was written in 2007, I believe, 2008 time frame. But I feel like it gives you just a basic idea. Now, from reading this, I still want to know more. Like, I still want to know what led to all of this. Where, you know, whereas in Cobalt Red, it's like, oh, well, you know, all of these countries, they need cobalt for this, and this, and they're not worried about who is affected by this process. Whereas in this is just, you know, stories directly from those people, but it's not telling you, you know, what happened to where these things started taking place. So after reading this book, I feel like I need to continue to educate myself, because I feel like this wasn't enough, but it's a great start. So there you go. And now it brings us to where we currently are. I just finished a Soda Heel a few days ago, and this is book number 2 in the Dustwalker Bride series, and it did not disappoint. To me, this is another 5 out of 5, and I say that because, once again, from the very beginning, you get hooked on these characters. It's like, especially with the female main character, you're like, I would have, what she does in the beginning, you're like immediately like, I would have done the same thing, no question, like I would have done the same thing. And then she ends up in the Vale, which is where the demons and the Dustwalkers live. And from the beginning, it's like you understand why the female main character is saying the things that she's saying, why she's behaving the way that she's behaving, and to find the Mavka, who is still learning, but he knows enough that it's just his job to heal her and love her through whatever she is going through. It's just like, you find yourself just like, you I haven't even been looking at my notes because these books are just, but yeah. The one thing about this book is I was wondering if the characters from the first book were going to appear in this one, and they do. And they help the main characters in this book. They help them along, and you learn more about other characters that were introduced in the first book. I don't want to give anything away, but what I say she does in the beginning, and the life that she's lived prior to being thrown in the veil, you can relate to it on so many levels. And so you understand why she's depressed, and you understand why she, like I said, why she does and says some of the things that she says. And you yourself as the reader, you're just like wanting her to be healed through love. And you just, when you see the things that the male character does, your heart is just like, you're just attached. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but you just genuinely become attached to the characters. And the way that she is writing the love story for them, it's not just them going at it. In neither book is it just the characters going at it. Is it spicy? Absolutely. When they go at it, they go at it. And it's very descriptive. But it's not a 500-page book of just them going for it. There is a beautiful, beautiful love story. And there are some twists that I did not see coming, but they made sense when they did come. And I already have books 3 and 4. I still gotta order book 5, but I'm telling you, I don't really see many people talking about this book. And these so far, the first 2 books have been amazing. And I don't know if that's, I can't even say that's because I've never read this genre, because if you relate to a book, you relate to a book. Doesn't matter if you read that genre your entire life or if you just picked it up. These books are very well written. The characters are very well developed, and anybody can understand a love story. I love this series. So, like I said, these are the 7 books that I have read from my 2024 TBR. Wow, I went back 4 years.